Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate coming at you, continuing my reviews of the Amityville movies and coming at you to review what I would regard as probably the worst one, or at least the worst one that I've seen. A year later, after Amityville 1992, it's about time. Republic Pictures would put out this absolutely ridiculous, stupid, just completely dumb excuse for an Amityville movie. Amityville, a new generation. And this movie, I just rewatched this last night. All I have is the VHS of this. It starts kind of okay, but it's absolutely just stupid. So basically, previous Amityville sequels have already done the Demon Lamp, then the Demon Clock. This time we've got the Demon Mirror. Basically, the premise of this movie is, and at least the other movies actually had characters in a house, whereas this movie is just so anti-Amityville in the sense that, you know, this movie the characters live in all together in this kind of just rat-tattered old, you know, brick frickin' apartment building crap in the middle of the city. So I mean, at least the other sequels, like I said, you know, Amityville sequels, I think they all pretty much took place in a house, whereas this one's just like they don't even bother with the house aspect anymore. I guess you could say that it's this movie's way of being different and fresh and new or whatever. But basically this movie takes place in this old, just dilapidated apartment full of like all these, for some reason, like everyone who lives here, except for maybe the landlord who also lives there with his presumably wife, who's that goofy girl from Friday the 13th, the final chapter. There's a lot of familiar faces in this movie. You got David Naughton from frickin' American Werewolf in London. You got the Asian chick from Rambo First Blood Part 2. You got that goofy girl who was, you know, the girl who dies, how she died by the axe through the door in final chapter. I can't remember her name. I want to say there's other people too in this movie with familiar faces and stuff. But I mean, it's got a, oh yeah, the guy from Nightmare on Elm Street 2 plays the ex, well, you know, the guy had only known her, I guess, in this movie for like 6 days, but this crappy ex-boyfriend who comes of the Asian chick who comes back to, you know, try to do whatever. So basically this freaking apartment is full of, like, everyone except for the landlord's freaking some kind of artist. You got this one guy who's like, makes sculptures, and this Asian chick is a painter, and the main star of this guy who would actually go on to have a little bit part in the Lost World and from, you know, the Jurassic Park sequel in the subway, recognizing Jeff Goldblum in the subway. He's like, you know, walks over to him and he's like, "You're the dinosaur guy, right?" So that guy is the main, I think pretty much the main star in this absolutely ridiculous excuse for Amityville movie, but just, you know, dumb excuse for a horror movie. I kind of think, well, maybe it's not horrible as a, I don't know, I don't like it regardless, you know, what way you look at it. I think it's dumb either way. So what ends up happening, you know, I don't mind the movie, actually, the setup of the characters and stuff, and to be honest, it would have probably been an okay movie if you just did some kind of a adult drama about just these, you know, these artists living in this freaking building and just, you know, what goes on with their lives trying to make it in the art world or whatever. Would have been kind of probably more interesting than turning this into a horror movie, because I kind of, you know, like the movie when it's at the very beginning, when it's setting up characters and stuff. But what ends up happening is this photographer main character ends up seeing at a diner out the window across the street this homeless guy kind of just backing out of a cardboard box, and he's like taking pictures of it like it's going to be some, you know, photos of the century, some kind of amazing art stuff. And he goes over to the guy saying, you know, "I just took some pictures of you. I think they're going to be really good, so why don't I give you $10, you know, I'll maybe make thousands off them, and I'll give you $10 to ease my conscience." And what ends up happening is this older guy, in exchange, gives him this mirror, which is basically, you know, on the cover here, it's got this scary face on top of the mirror. So basically, the, you know, the surrounding part of the front of the cover here is the mirror. So in exchange, I guess this homeless guy gives this guy the mirror, and what ends up happening, of course, is, you know, the mirror is brought back to this apartment where they all live, and you know, it's the mirror. We end up finding out later on in the movie that this mirror had of course been in the, the Amityville house. And not only that, if you think that's stupid, this movie goes one step further, and basically it takes like almost the whole movie to say this crap. But towards the end of the movie, we find out that not only is the mirror, of course, from the Amityville house, but the old guy who gave the mirror to the kid is not just some random old guy. It's the guy who shot up his family basically at the beginning of the first Amityville movie. And if you think that's stupid, it gets even stupider, where the guy's not only the guy who shot up his family at the beginning of the first Amityville movie, but he's also the father of this main photographer character. And it's just like, what the hell? And it, you know, you don't find these things out until probably the last third of the movie or whatever, and it's just like, oh my god, talk about this movie might be the perfect example of just the ultimate just contrived nonsense. I mean, maybe making the old guy, the guy who shot the family up, isn't so bad, but also making him the main character's dad is just like, oh my god. So what ends up happening throughout the movie, before we find any of that crap out, is, you know, people one by one are kind of affected by the mirror. This Asian woman has this, you know, this guy that she had basically in a relationship with for 6 days. And it's the guy who was in the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, kind of the friend of, I think his name was Grady, his character's name was Grady from Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. It's this guy, it's this jerk guy who's like dumped, you know, she's the Asian girl, the Asian woman from Rambo First Blood Part 2 breaks up with, and she comes back later on, towards the beginning of the movie, and when she's not home, and ransacks her place and cuts up her paintings and stuff, and of course it happens across the mirror, and he looks into the mirror and he starts seeing himself. He's like, oh yeah, doing that, and then it's all of a sudden in the mirror he sees like a cut, and he's like, oh, and we see him not in the mirror and there's no cut, and then in the mirror there'll be like another cut, and we'll see him in the, you know, no mirror and there's no cut, and in the mirror then there'll be another cut, and you know, this isn't really happening on his face, but he's seeing it in the mirror. That's kind of cool. He gets so worked up by what he's seeing in the mirror, he's like, oh, and kind of just goes over and falls through like his face falls through the window, and he gets all cut up. And it must slit his throat too, because I think that kills him. So he must get his throat slit during his trip through, you know, his face goes through the mirror, or not the mirror, the window of the apartment. And so that's kind of in a cool and a dumb way, you know, to see the mirror show the future of how they're going to die, and that ends up happening later on, not too long later, with the Asian woman from Rambo First Blood Part 2, who will end up looking in the mirror, and she made this art exhibit with all these demon paintings, and if there's like this hangman's noose, and if you pull on the hangman's noose, the paintings, you know, move, and that she calls it the dance, you know, they dance. And so later on she'll be looking in the mirror, and she can see like a hangman's noose behind her in the mirror, and then she sees a version of her in the mirror like put the hangman's noose on, and then basically I don't know if that makes her I think this cuts away from the scene, but later on we end up seeing her, you know, the character end up found being, you know, hung, of course. So I mean, you know, the movies with those two kills, you know, where the victim sees their outcome or their demise in the mirror, is kind of a cool idea, and it's probably done before this movie. I know that there's a movie called Mirror Mirror and all this kind of crap. I had never seen that, but I mean, I imagine that movie could have potentially done something very similar. So, like, I don't know, the first third of this movie maybe isn't horrible, but probably after it reaches like that point or the halfway point through the movie, this movie just evolves into just like a Nancy Drew Hardy Boys mystery of this main character photographer guy just trying to figure out his past. You know, basically, you know, he never knew his dad, and of course we know why, because he was a criminal shooter who got his mom pregnant right before he killed his whole family. You know, in the beginning of the first movie, it's just like, so I don't know. I want to say the last half or almost more of this movie, and the last half for sure, just involves this guy trying to figure out his past and childhood and crap. It's just like you don't even care, and it's full of all this kind of goofy stuff where he visits certain spots and has flashbacks about this and that, and it's just, I don't know, it's just completely uninteresting to me, and just made you just want to, I don't know what. So throughout the movie, this main character, photographer guy, I think sees these visions of like a POV coming down the hall and hearing like a knife sharpening in the room and like a family. I think this movie says like the murders, you know, with the guy gunning down his family took place on Thanksgiving. So we see this scene like a bazillion times in this movie with the sounds of the knife sharpening and the POV coming down the hall into the dining room where the guy, you know, the dad's, you know, sharpening the knives and the mom's at the table and the two kids are at the table and, you know, they get blown away or whatever. What ends up happening, the more and more this main photographer character, you know, comes to understand, or more he finds out in the movie, is this guy, you know, he realizes that he's the shooter's frickin' son, and he's got it in his, he's convinced that he's got it in his blood where he's destined to blow away his own family the same way, even though he doesn't have a family in the sense of like a wife and kids or whatever, which is just so stupid. Throughout all kinds of this and that, he finds out all kinds of stupid shit through all kinds of just dumb scenes that are completely uninteresting, and it took all my willpower just not to fast forward through. So from the very beginning of the movie, these characters are talking about like an art exhibit or an art show that they want to hold, and you know, they start. That's what I thought was kind of cool at the opening of the movie. Like, it would have been a cool movie just about these artists and just wanting to do this art show, and the end of the movie could have just been the art show or whatever, and just forget about the dumb horror aspect of it, because, you know, the beginning of the movie they're talking about they want to do this art exhibit in the apartment and stuff and all this and that. And then when the horror stuff happens, you think they just forget, you know, people are dying. You think they just forget about the art exhibit, but no, you know, art must go on even if, you know, tenants are dying or whatever. So at the end of the movie there's this art exhibit where, you know, this one sculptor did this kind of cool bit where it's this freaking TV and there's this shotgun on the TV pointed at the guy sitting in the chair and the camera's pointing at you, so it's got on the screen you see a face of you sitting in the chair, and he's like, this gun's set to go off sometime between now and 2001, and it's just like, it's kind of like, so basically there's this freaking loaded gun as a part of the exhibit, which of course this guy who believes he's destined to blow away his family, even though he doesn't have a family, obviously he gets a hold of this loaded gun, and they were originally gonna, the girlfriend of this guy originally convinced him to do some kind of to work through his demons by setting up a dinner table Thanksgiving scene and have him come in with a squirt bottle and squirt them, you know, to kind of work through his demons. Of course, he ends up taking the shotgun off this other guy's, you know, art exhibit or whatever with the TV and the sofa where it's pointed at the guy in the chair or whatever, and he comes into the room and all the patrons that are there for the art exhibit are watching on in horror or whatever, or, you know, delight or with the curiosity, and this guy comes in, he's like shooting, it's like he's standing point blank and he's shooting at stuff. I mean, it's a shotgun, it's not like it's one bullet, it's just he's shooting at the table and he's only hitting like stuff, you know, turkey on the table, and I can't remember how many shots he gets off, but at this range you're gonna hit someone even accidentally with the shotgun, but he shoots at least, I don't know, 2 or 3 shots and hits stuff on the table, and until he's like, he's kind of possessed or whatever, you know, until he sees, you know, his father in the mirror that's over in the corner of the room, and he's like, come on boy, shoot him up, or whatever the hell he's saying. He's prompting him to, you know, to do it and blow these people away. Basically, I mean, I guess it's his family in the sense of family and friends, not, you know, wife and kids or whatever. So these 3 people who are the other tenants of the apartment, the sculptor guy and his girlfriend and the crazy girl from Final Chapter who gets the axe through the door, are just like, he, you know, he fires some shots, missing them, hitting everything else on the table and stuff, and then he's, you know, prompted by their crazy dad in the mirror until he finally gets the human strength to basically aim the gun at the mirror and blow the mirror away, killing, you know, the evil mirror and the evil whatever, you know, apparition or the evil sort, you know, force of his dad, you know, in the mirror. And it's just like, oh my gosh, it's such an eye roller movie, and I can't even remember. I think the movie, I don't know if I can't remember what happens after that. I was just so delighted that it was over at that point, and wow. So I didn't intend for the review to go on this long, but pardon me, I kind of wanted to explain the movie, and I guess the more I explain it, the more, I don't know. So that's my review of Amityville: A New Generation. As I said, it's like I say, it started cool and would have been better to just be some kind of drama about these people, these artists in the apartment building. Instead of trying to interject some kind of Amityville horror, aspect in the movie, I thought was just so stupid. So this movie was so stupid, I'm gonna give this movie 0 out of 4 stars for Amityville: A New Generation. It's absolutely, completely boring as crap, and like I say, after maybe the first 20 or 30 minutes were doable, but after that you can just forget about it. Highly unrecommended. Stay far away from Amityville: A New Generation. And of course, since this movie was so horrible back in the day, I never bothered with Amityville Dollhouse at the time. I am curious at this point to see Amityville Dollhouse. I checked on YouTube. Unfortunately, I'm not finding it on YouTube. So, I am curious to see for a decent price Amityville Dollhouse. I mentioned in my review of Amityville 4 that I thought my Amityville 4 DVD was, really rare and kind of worth money. Well, no, that's Amityville Dollhouse. That DVD is going for like, I don't know what, 50, 60 bucks online and stuff like that. So, Amityville Dollhouse is the last Amityville movie I think made in the 90s, so I'm kind of ashamed that I didn't, get to see that. In addition to, I'm kind of curious about that. I know they've made all kinds of Amityville sequels since in the 21st century and stuff, but this is my last review of, for the time being, of an Amityville sequel. The next review to go up will be the remake of my review of the Amityville remake of Amityville Horror. And then, unless I see any more Amityville movies, I'm sure down the line I'll be able to see Dollhouse and the more recent Amityville movie, and then I can do the reviews for those at that time. But thank you very much for watching this review, and as always, we'll catch you next time.